But I'd like to hand it over now to Ian Aitchison, the Chief Executive of COPC.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm going to talk a bit about AI in contact centers. I'm going to talk from 3 different points of view. I'm going to talk from research, but from 3 different points of view. I'm going to talk from the manager's point of view about their adoption of AI tools and their perceived ROI of AI tools. The main part of the session will be looking from the consumers or the customers, the end user's point of view of when they're interacting with AI, how they perceive those interactions. But also, I thought it was interesting to incorporate some of the employee experience about dealing with AI and how they feel about it as well. So we're going to come at it from 3 main points of view. The first part that I want to share comes from some of the research we did for AusContact, which is looking at the objectives and the challenges that contact center managers say that they have this year. And it's interesting, when you look at the data, you can see that 57% of them say that they have objectives of implementing new technology, and 53% of them, these are all Australian managers, say they're trying to integrate AI into their operations. 4 years ago, integrating AI into operations was negligible. It's now very much mainstream when half the individuals are trying to do it. But what's also interesting, at the same time as we're trying to, and the top 2, improve the customer experience, improve the employee experience, they're kind of the same every year. You don't really learn much from that. Those are the same top challenges, top objectives every year. What's interesting is the change in the challenges that people are happening. So you can see that the 2 biggest ones are budgetary constraints and improving efficiency. And I went to have a look at this same question 4 years ago, 2021. And when we can see here that 75% say that budgetary constraints is a challenge, 4 years ago, budgetary constraints, that was only 50% said it was a challenge. Reducing cost 4 years ago, only 32% said it was a challenge, whereas now it's 43%. And improving efficiency, 57%, now it's 70%. So we can see that there is, in the Australian contact center industry, although we still have the objectives of improving the customer experience, improving the employee experience, we're kind of getting squeezed a bit more now than we were a few years ago. We're getting squeezed around budgets. We're getting squeezed around having to drive efficiency. And so one of the ways that we are trying to impact those challenges is by integrating AI into our operations. And as we'll see, chatbots are probably the most common AI tool that we're trying to use to interact with customers. But it's interesting to see that chatbot adoption seems to have plateaued, certainly over the last year. Now, I know it's only 1 data point over the last year. But if we look back at 2021, about 28% of contact center managers said they had some form of chatbot, and another 43% said, yeah, we're going to get it in the next 18 months. Now, chatbots 4 years ago are not the same as chatbots now. Last year, though, that 28% of adoption had increased to 36%. There has been no change over the last 12 months, though, so it's still, the adoption remains the same. The intent to adopt is actually, I mean, it's still quite high, but it's decreased a little bit. So I'm wondering what's going on about that, and that kind of drives me to look at some of our global research around adoption and perceived return on investment. Now, this is a slightly complicated chart to look at, but it's on 2 different axes. And if you go from left to right is little adoption of the technology to full adoption, and then bottom to top is about ROI, but turned into a simple percentage of what percentage of people who have adopted that technology say they've had positive return on investment, right? So it doesn't tell you about how big the ROI is. It just tells you, of the managers who've implemented it, how many or what percentage of them are getting a positive return on investment? Chatbots are still, so furthest to the right is the most adopted. Chatbots are still the most adopted both in Australia and globally. Knowledge management is somewhere in the middle, but as you can see, it's got the third highest return, the third most respondents to say they got a positive return on investment. If you're looking in the middle at Agent Assist 1 and Agent Assist 2, please don't ask me which is which, but one is auto call summarization, the other one is popping up answers to the agents. I've circled in red automated QA because over the last few years, that has moved down from return on investment from kind of being within the pack to reasonably low. And I think it's interesting that QA, automated AI-driven QA, is not giving the return that managers think it should be. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think none of them are because the tools themselves aren't good enough. And actually, I was having a discussion with Sam just before, but it seems as though individuals have not thought about what problems are they trying to solve with the technology. They've just bought the technology. And if you have, using the QA as an example, if you've got a pretty crappy QA process, or your QA process doesn't really help you drive better customer experience, let's say it's all focused on, if your QA is focused on what the agent did rather than what the customer got, you've probably got a bad QA process. You're focused on the wrong things. Our focus should be on what the customers get. Did they get the right answer? Did they get their issue resolved? If it's all about following call flow, did they greet the customer appropriately? Did they do X? Did they do Y? And you automate that with AI, it will tell you whether they did that or not, but it doesn't drive any customer satisfaction, customer experience benefits. Anyway, that's a long way of saying no AI tools are showing 100% return on investment. All of them are showing some return on investment for some people. What this chart doesn't show, that what was important was if it takes a year or two for a technology to be in place before that return on investment becomes visible. And so there was a big difference between people who'd only just had the technology put in the last year compared to those who'd had it in for a couple of years. Anyway, the main meat of this presentation is talking about the consumer's perceptions of when they're interacting with your organizations or interacting with AI within contact centers, mainly contact centers. The most common is dealing with a chatbot, typically through company's website. The second most common was AI chat in a messaging app, whether that's WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, WeChat, etc. Then the voice bot, and then using a virtual assistant within a mobile app, which is getting more and more common in financial services, as an example. And the least common is interacting with email, AI and email, although AI support in email is much more assistance rather than completely automated, although we did hear an example before about how it could get completely automated, but we've got to exclude them from this. This was just looking at completely automated, which was a real low amount. We surveyed people in a number of different countries, Australia, China, Malaysia, Singapore, UK, US, and it's interesting that Australia, if you can see the bottom left-hand number, 24% of the people surveyed had not had any interaction in the last few months with an AI chat of these people who'd interacted with contact centers. That is so much higher than any other country. So we're a little bit behind in Australia in our interaction with AI. China has always led the way with implementing AI. China as a country, for example, missed out credit cards. They went straight from a cash economy to mobile payments economy and just missed out credit cards. And so they've been adopting technology much faster than we have. WeChat, we think of like WhatsApp. For them, it's a whole payment method. It's a super app. it is so much more common for Chinese organizations to use AI in contact centers. And I think even prior to COVID, I was at insurance companies in China who were using AI, which at the time, fair enough, it was all in Chinese, so I didn't know if it sounded real or if it was right or wrong, but it sounded great. And it was a great way of being able to, they were just calling up all sorts of people who needed to renew their policies, and they were doing it through AI. Anyway, one of the first questions we ask, and then we drill into a lot of other things, is based on your most recent AI interaction, overall, how satisfied were you with that interaction? The overall number there was 74%. Now, we ask it on a 5-point scale, with very satisfied being the top, very dissatisfied the bottom, a neutral midpoint. Most contact centers, as in voice, who use that same scale, are aiming for about 85% top 2 box. So 74% you wouldn't say is great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And it's interesting when you do bits of research like this, you often have what we call hypothesis. And so my hypothesis was that text-based AI channels would have higher satisfaction than voice-based AI channels. And my thought was, probably based on ever having to contact large telcos and having to not quite understand how you even ask the question when it says, in your own words, please tell me in a few words. And I always struggled to, and like you've all got accents, I don't, but being Scottish, sometimes AI doesn't quite get what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so I built this whole hypothesis about text-based would have better CSAT than voice-based, and that's just not true. Which was interesting, but it shows that AI is getting better, that the voice-based channels deliver roughly the same level of satisfaction as the text-based, but the email ones are the lowest. And the email ones are the lowest because of the nature of email communication, right? It's typically one step in a multi-step journey when you're communicating by email. It's not instant resolution. And as we see, issue resolution is, I'll spoil the surprise in a few slides, but issue resolution is the only thing, not the only thing, it's the main thing any contact center should be thinking about, because issue resolution is what drives satisfaction, right? Issue resolution is number one. If your processes, policies, processes, don't allow an issue to be resolved, implementing technology, new technology, still will not allow that issue to be resolved. So we wanted to look and see, okay, did the AI tool understand the issue? So a few years ago when we did this, about 75% of the time, the AI tools understood the issue. It's not changed that much. It's still, what is it? AI chat and a messaging app was 78% issue understanding, 78% in the chat bot, and then 65% in email. Again, not much gap between voice and text. One of the other things that we wanted to ask was, how do you even know that you're interacting with AI? And so we asked that. Are the customers made aware they're interacting with AI? When you interacted with AI, did you know straight away? Was it mentioned in the interaction? Did you work it out yourself? Or was it implied but never explicitly stated? 58% of the time, so just over half the time, it's said up front, hey, you are interacting with our AI-driven powered chatbot. The interesting thing out of that is, irrespective of whether the issue is ultimately resolved or not resolved, the satisfaction of the group who knew up front they were dealing with AI was much higher than the satisfaction of the group who kind of worked it out themselves because the conversation was a bit stilted or there was kind of funny answers. And I think that's what we call this transparency dividend. There's a huge difference between being upfront and honest if you've implemented a chatbot that they're dealing with a chatbot compared to pretending it's a human. So, upfront, honesty, transparency is important. This next chart's also a little bit confusing, but I'll go through it to make a bit of sense. So 100% of these people we spoke to interacted with AI in some way. 88% of them had their issues resolved. Somehow 12% did not. Of those who had their issues resolved, 60-something, said that it was resolved entirely within the AI channel that they interacted with. About 25% of them said, well, the AI kind of helped me, but then it handed me off to a human, and the human was able to resolve it. And then 12% said, no, AI didn't help at all, and then I had to go out and get the issue resolved myself by contacting the call center directly. How the customer experiences this seems to impact their satisfaction. Now, customer satisfaction, Net Promoter Score, customer effort score are probably the three most common metrics measuring the customer experience. They all measure the same thing. They measure the emotions of the person at the moment you ask them the question. Although the questions are slightly different and they're all supposed to measure slightly different things, we've done enough looking at it that they are all highly correlated, and it's all about the emotions of the person at that time. If they are positively, if their emotions about your organization are positive, they would score highly on Net Promoter Score and CSAT and customer effort, right? It just it's not 100% related, each of them, but it's like 95% related, okay? So this is just an emotional measurement. That is my getting in there, because I'm going to show you CSAT and NPS. I don't want an argument about whether CSAT's better than NPS or NPS is the wrong thing. They all just measure the emotions of the customer. And if you can't tie it to some business outcome, you shouldn't measure it anyway. So if we look at satisfaction, if the issue was resolved completely in the AI tool, it was 93% top two box satisfaction, because all customers want is their issue to be resolved. And they have taken the time to go and interact with the chatbot. If you resolve, or whatever channel, I'll use chatbot because it was most common. If you can resolve their issue within the chatbot, 93% of them are satisfied. For those who couldn't be fully resolved but then were handed off to a human, there was still 79% satisfaction, which isn't great, but it's okay. If they had to go off, they couldn't get it resolved in the AI tool, they had to go off themselves and get it resolved some other way, typically by phoning the call center, even though they got their issue resolved in the end, the multiple steps it took to get there drove their satisfaction down to about 28%. And here's the thing in human psychology that I will never understand. 24% of the people who didn't get their issue resolved still said they were happy with the interaction. And I'm not sure why some people still say that. You can see from the Net Promoter Score that the pattern is very similar. The one with the highest Net Promoter Scores when it was completely resolved within AI, that's a positive 33. If I go back one step, this just shows you the massive impact that resolving issues has. Issue resolved, Net Promoter Score plus 10. Issue not resolved, minus 69. Complete resolved within AI, it's plus 33. And then I think what's very interesting is CSAT going from whatever it was, 90-something down to 79%. You think 79% is quite a good CSAT result. Actually, that equated to a negative Net Promoter Score. It wasn't particularly good. And you can see that if they had to go and resolve it themselves, they were particularly unhappy. So how did they feel? How did they feel about these things? How did they feel? Did they feel that interacting with AI was easier, better, faster, more personalized? Now, bear in mind, we ask these questions of people who've just had an AI interaction, right? So I think it slightly biases them towards thinking positively, certainly as many of them had had their issue resolved, right? So this is different from if you did some market research and took a group, some of whom had an interaction, some had not. The blue bars up there is where they say that AI application was better than the human. The green bars are where it says it's about the same, and the yellow bars is where it says the AI application was worse. So if you take away the yellow from the blue, that gives you the net, was it better, was it worse? In times, and things to do with time or speed, so total time spent interacting, timeliness of resolution, and I suppose ease of resolution, those are all really net positive. The AI is much, for this group, is much better than humans. For the quality of resolution, accuracy of information, and the ability to understand, it's still net positive, but it's less net positive. The only thing that they said the AI was worse than humans was in the level of personalization in the interaction that they had. And yet, it possibly doesn't matter, because all they wanted was their issue resolved. Right? So they're saying it was worse because it was worse level of personalization. But if you resolve their issue, that's what drove satisfaction. Personalizing the conversation and not resolving the issue is a massive waste of time. It's all about resolving the issue. We then wanted to know, would you be comfortable using AI in the future? And the group who had interacted with AI before, 75% of them said, yeah, I'd be comfortable doing it in the future, 25%. And those who had not, only 25% of them said, yeah, I'd be comfortable interacting with AI in the future. So this fear of using AI is kind of overcome when you actually interact with it. Now, I don't have a chart which shows this, but I should have. But those who interacted with AI and didn't get their issue resolved, they don't want to interact with AI in the future. So you've got to do two things. One, you've got to seduce customers into using whatever AI channel you have. But two, don't think about it as a way of deflecting calls or taking cost out of the business. It's got to be there as important as any other channel. It's got to be there to resolve customers' issues, answer their questions. If it can't do that, then you've just put a channel in place that drives dissatisfaction, and people won't use it. They'll keep making phone calls to the contact center. There wasn't much, I mean, the email reply generated by AI, people are not comfortable in using AI in the future because most of them didn't get their issues resolved. Those who had decent issue resolution were much more likely to say yes. So we are implementing AI. We're implementing chatbots. We should be doing this to make employees' lives easier, not to replace employees, right? That's kind of, I think everyone kind of knows that, yeah, AI works best when it enhances the contact center staff rather than replacing the contact center staff. And so the kind of the number one use case that a lot of firms are talking about is, say, auto call summarization, using AI to write their after call notes seems to be the best, easiest to implement and least painful AI application at the moment in contact centers. And that's because it's making agents' lives easier. So let's have a little look at the employees' perceptions of AI in contact centers. First of all, we asked, I'll give you some background on this. We do some employee engagement research each year, looking at people who work in contact centers around the world, somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 responses. Of that, we asked a subgroup of that these questions about interacting with AI. So this is only from a few hundred. I think it was about 500, maybe less than 500, but a few hundred. It's not the whole 5,000. We asked them, how frequently do you use AI tools to support you in your daily work? And 39% said they never use AI at all. 12% said rarely, 20% occasionally, and then the rest you can see frequently. And a small group, almost 1 in 10, said, yeah, use it always, every day, using AI all the time to help me in the contact center. And we'd asked this a year ago, and we were thinking about, lots of people don't seem that happy with the AI tools they've got. And so this year we asked a question about, were you actually trained in how to use those tools? And surprisingly, 70%, 7 out of 10 of them said, no, we weren't trained in how to use them. And so just keep that in mind for the last slide. And so if any of you work in training, or indeed any of you are involved in change management, can we imagine, or the TSA discussion before, but you've got to bring people along when you implement new technology. If you don't train them in how to use it properly, well, bear that in mind. So how has integration of AI into your work affected your overall job satisfaction? That was the first thing we wanted to know, because there was a fear that it would make people's jobs worse. Because there's a thought that AI will take away all the simple work and call center agents will just have to deal with complex stuff. And complex stuff, you think that would be a good thing for agents, but actually complex stuff is often the stuff that's the hardest to answer and you have the most difficult conversations with, and not everybody enjoys that. A lot of people working in call centers quite like the easy stuff to deal with. Anyway, so our hypothesis was implementing AI will make people's jobs worse. Well, it doesn't seem the case. 17% said it was impacting their satisfaction very positively. 49% said positively. And only 13% said it was impacting their job satisfaction negatively or very negatively. I don't even know if it says that. Yeah, very negatively. So that's good. AI implementation seems to be quite positive for people. So we then also asked, all right, so you're happier, but do you think it's improving the level of, or the quality of customer service you're providing? And again, not the vast majority, I'll use my language right, but the biggest chunk agreed or strongly agreed. And only a small amount disagreed with that statement. So that's good. It seems that those who are using AI are happier. It's helping them be happier. It's helping them deliver a better level of service. Is it reducing stress? Well, kind of. But the net difference is smaller here. And so what that tells us is that it's not necessarily the tools they are using that are the #1 cause of stress in the call center employee's job. It does have some impact. If you're using really crappy technology, it does drive stress. But moving from one technology to AI it was having a slight positive, but it wasn't having that much of an impact, which means that most of the stress is about the customers themselves, maybe, their team leader's a pain in the ass, their shifts are wrong, the day they answered the survey, they'd got out of bed the wrong side and just said, no, it doesn't matter. Anyway, in general, although it's only a small percentage who are saying that they're always using AI tools at work, of those who have started using AI tools, the data shows that it does have a net positive impact on their job satisfaction. They do feel that it's improving the quality of customer service they're delivering, and it does seem to have a positive impact on the level of stress they're feeling. But how can we make a bigger difference? Well, we can make a bigger difference by actually training them before they start using these tools. So I split the group up into those who were trained in how to use the tools they had and those who were just had it dropped on them. And you can see from those who were trained in how to use the tools that about 80-something% said that it had positively impacted their job satisfaction, and it was only about 60% of those who'd had it dropped on them. And that's because we were potentially not part of the implementation. Being trained means you're part of the implementation. That's got a big impact whether you find the technology helping you or not. So in summary, how do I summarize this? I summarize it with a slide that I wrote this morning. Resolution is critical. If nothing else, just remember that issue resolution is really the whole reason we run contact centers. Doesn't matter whether we are in local government, federal government, bank, insurance, pet insurance, doesn't matter. When someone contacts us, our job is to resolve their issue. The best way of resolving their issue is by giving them the answers to their questions. To be able to give them the answers to the questions, we need to make sure that we have our knowledge management at the heart of the AI implementation from this point of view, because implementing AI that cannot, A, understand their issue, and B, resolve it, is a pointless implementation. And so we need to get our knowledge right. If only we knew a good knowledge management tool that could help with that. Another thing to remember, transparency builds trust. So the difference in satisfaction between those people who knew they were interacting with AI and those who had to find it out themselves during the interaction was huge. But also experience drives adoption. So a positive experience makes it much more likely that someone will continue to want to use that channel in the future. If you just bolt on a chatbot with the mere aim of trying to deflect calls rather than to improve the customer experience, then that will fail. That will just fail. And I kind of chucked it in here, but QA systems need recalibrated. The current AI QA systems need to be recalibrated, and they need to be recalibrated around the customer's needs. So if QA is measuring what an agent did, that's making a mistake. If it's measuring what the customer got, as in did they get their issue resolved, did they get the correct answer, did they get it done in the right way, then QA can really drive business benefits. And finally, training employees in the tools that you're implementing impacts the satisfaction that those employees have. Trained AI users are much more satisfied than those who are not trained. And that is my findings for today.
Questions? Al's ready to run. We're going to have a race to see who's going to get the microphone.
It's Jackie.
Oh, right, Jackie.
Hi. I had a question. With the early on slides where you're talking about customers, did you have any age demographic information around that at all?
Yes, we do. I can't tell you what it is. And I'll tell you why I can't tell you what it is, because So there kind of is a bit of a difference that I can see between younger users and older users. That kind of exists, although not as strongly as you might think. But we do this research so our customers can make better decisions about how they manage their operations. And typically, demographics or age, sex, gender is not something that we can change about our customers, and that's why we don't focus on it as much. But when we do collect it, and I can look it up later and tell you what it is.
Thanks. We get a lot of questions from clients who have an older demographic saying, oh, they're not interested in chatbots, they won't talk to a virtual agent, they don't touch digital, they're always going to call, and I don't agree.
No, so there is a slight difference, but it's not a huge difference.
Yeah,
that sweeping statement just doesn't hold true.
Yeah.
Another interesting demographic thing, may I go at a tangent? In banks, for example, there was always that sweeping statement that was old people come into the branch or old people call us and new people are using the app all the time. But actually we found in home loan specific queues, it was more the young people because they have zero life experience and they've never had a home loan before and they need someone to talk to them about home loans. Whereas if it's your third home loan, you're happy to do it online. And in fact, you'd prefer not to speak to a human and try and get it done online, although they will nearly always make you talk to a human. So that demographic thing, they had this view, young people wouldn't phone, young people would use apps, old people would always phone, they would never use self-service. Well, that wasn't true in that specific case.
Thank you very much for that. I was wondering about the QA because that's one I find really intriguing. Do you think if there was a way to put the QA and link it to the knowledge management system to say, hey, look, here's your QA, and this is what our knowledge management system says that you could have offered as an answer. Would that be something?
Perfect. Brilliant. Because then it's looking at whether the issue was actually resolved or we gave the right answer or didn't give the right answer. It's hard for QA at real time to know whether an issue was fully resolved, because sometimes the conversation happens, but something has to happen after the conversation for it to be resolved. But if you link it to livepro, the knowledge management tool, you can at least tell whether the customer was given the right answer, and that would be a great way of automating that.
Any other questions?